Millions of people watched John Jones wreck Cyril Gaines in round 1 of UFC 285, making it one of the most watched MMA events ever. For those of you who don't know, the UFC, or Ultimate Fighting Championship, is the largest mixed martial arts, or MMA, promotion company in the world. They have a global audience and feature some of the most well-known and talented fighters in the sport. Why do so many people watch the UFC? Let's find out. The UFC was founded in 1993 by Art Davie, Bob Merowitz, and Rorion Gracie? I'm sorry, Brazil. Their goal is to promote a new style of fighting that combined elements of various martial arts disciplines departing from popular single-form martial arts like boxing or karate. Think Street Fighter 2, but with real blood. The early years of the UFC were marked by controversy and criticism as the sport was seen as violent and lacking in rules and regulations. However, the UFC continued to grow in popularity, and by the late 1990s, it had become one of the most watched and talked about sports in the world. In 2001, the UFC was purchased by Zuffa LLC, a company owned by brothers Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. The Fertittas had a background in the casino and gambling industry, and they saw potential for the UFC to become a legitimate sport that could be marketed and promoted to a wider audience. The Fertittas brought in noted wife slapper Dana White to head the UFC. White, the Jeff Bezos of MMA, is known for his outspoken personality and willingness to take risks, and his Freudian need for attention. He became a key figure in the growth of MMA as a mainstream sport, and he helped popularize UFC around the world. Under his leadership, the UFC underwent a major transformation with new rules and regulations introduced to make the sport safer and more accessible to fans. The UFC also began marketing itself more aggressively to attract fans and build its brand. One of the key strategies that the UFC used to build its brand was to focus on fighters and their personal stories. The UFC began to produce more video content around its fighters, including interviews, training footage, and behind-the-scenes looks at their lives outside of the octagon. This helped to create a sense of connection between fans and the fighters, and it helped to build the UFC's reputation as a legitimate sport. Another important aspect of the UFC's marketing strategy was its partnership with other companies and brands. The UFC has worked with a wide range of partners over the years, including companies like Reebok, Harley-Davidson, and Bud Light. These partnerships have helped to increase visibility for the UFC and to bring in new fans who might not have been interested in the sport otherwise. Who knew Harley-Davidson and Bud Light would have the same audience? In addition to its promotional partners, the UFC has successfully secured major broadcast deals with television networks like Fox and ESPN. These deals have helped to bring the sport to a wider audience and to cement the UFC's position as a premier MMA promotional company in the world. Turns out violence is the answer. Despite its success, the UFC has faced its fair share of scandals and controversies over the years. One of the most notable controversies involved performance-enhancing drugs, or PEDs, with several high-profile fighters testing positive for banned substances. The UFC has taken a strong stance against PEDs, not to be confused with pedos. They implemented a strict drug testing policy and worked with the United States Anti-Doping Agency to catch and punish fighters who use illegal substances. Another major scandal involved the UFC's treatment of its fighters, particularly with regard to fighter pay and benefits. I guess Dana White and Jeff Bezos have more in common than just a haircut. Fighters have spoken out about the low pay and lack of benefits, calling for the UFC to increase fighter compensation and provide better healthcare and retirement benefits. To their credit, the UFC has taken steps to address low pay, like increasing fighter pay from $10,000 per fight to a whopping $12,000 per fight. I mean, that's like half a month's rent. Yes, technically that's a 20% pay raise, but when you consider fighters only fight once or twice a year while training full-time and having to pay a staff and trainers, they might be better off working at McDonald's. At least the benefits would be better. While the UFC is certainly the biggest, they are not the only major MMA promotion. Some of the UFC's biggest competitors include Bellator, One Championship, and Professional Fighters League. These companies differentiate themselves from the UFC in a number of ways, including their marketing strategies, their rules and regulations, and fighter compensation models. Bellator MMA is probably the closest analog to the UFC. They focus on creating compelling storylines and bringing in big-name fighters from other promotions, including former UFC champs. Bellator has been able to attract a loyal fan base by offering fighters an alternative platform to showcase their skills and earn a living. They also pay their fighters shit. One Championship out of Singapore has a different approach to MMA entirely. Rather than storylines and conflict, they emphasize traditional martial arts values like respect, humility, and discipline. One also incorporates elements of traditional martial arts into its events. Muay Thai and Wushu, for example, are regular events that they hold. Boring. The Professional Fighters League, or PFL, is a relative newcomer to the MMA scene. Its primary feature is a seasonal format like non-combat sports. For example, football and basketball seasons, complete with playoffs and championship events. Fighters compete in a season-long tournament for a chance to win a $1 million prize. Their format is noted for creating excitement and drama for fans because it forces champions to restart from the bottom every single season. This one seems kind of interesting. While these companies have some success in competing with the UFC, none of them have been able to match UFC's global reach and brand recognition. The UFC itself has come a long way since its early days as a bare-knuckle, unregulated Street Fighter II knockoff. Under Dana White's leadership, the UFC has become a global phenomenon, attracting fans from all around the world and establishing itself as the premier MMA promotion company, despite any controversies along the way. Their marketing strategies, focused on fighters and their personal stories, as well as their partnerships with other companies and brands, have helped to build the UFC's brand and increase its visibility. And while the UFC faces some competition, no one is going to overtake them as the dominant force in MMA, at least not anytime soon. As the sport of MMA continues to grow in popularity, I'm interested to see how the UFC and its competitors adapt and evolve over time to meet the demands of fans and fighters alike. There, now you're an expert. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell too. I release a new video on how different companies do business and marketing every single week, so don't forget to check them out. Cool, thanks.